to share with you how I make a lovely cup of clean tasting, refreshing tea. And you literally just pick the leaves off that you want. When you chop it like this, you can smell instantly how it releases the oils from there. And then you have some wonderful, clear, refreshing tea. Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about self-care and ensuring that you make time to do something that you really enjoy. One of my favourite things to do is to work with herbs from my garden and make them into something useful. At the same time, the focus needed for this allows me to switch off for a while and leave all my worries till later when I'm feeling much more resilient and balanced. One of my favourite herbs is mint, and I'm going to share with you today some of the things that I make with this wonderful herb. And I've got two varieties with me today that I've brought in from my herb garden. This is garden mint, and behind me here I've got spearmint, which we'll use a little bit later. So having a mint plant adds a wonderful scent and aroma to your garden, and it's very easy to grow, but you do need to contain it, as I've done here. The reason for that is it can grow really, really quickly and take over your garden, and obviously can integrate with your other herbs, which you don't want it to do. So just contain it in a pot or a specific area of the garden away from other things so that it won't overtake them. One of the things you do need to be careful of with mint, especially if you have pets and especially if you have cats, is to be aware that mint is toxic to cats. So you need to be very careful with it. And I've got cats myself, so my herb garden is covered so that the cats can't get to it, and that's probably the best way of preventing any little mishaps that you might get with curious cats. So, what are the things that you can do with mint? So, the first thing that I tend to think of is food related. So, I like to sprinkle some chopped up herbs on my yogurt and berries in the morning for breakfast. In the winter time, if I'm having porridge, I can sprinkle some finely chopped up mint over that, and it adds a different flavour dimension. And with mint, fresh mint, it is very rich in things like antioxidants, all types of vitamins and essential oils, which can really help with skin health. And chopping the leaves is what releases this goodness. So I'm going to do a little bit of a demo just to show you what I would do. And obviously, if you're going to chop the leaves, you don't need much. And the pot that I grow my mint in is sufficient for my use. I don't need any more than that. So take some nice sharp scissors, or some people prefer to just break that off. What you want to do is just pull off lovely leaves from this fresh garden mint. And you can see this one's slightly damaged, so you don't want to use that one. Just use the ones that haven't got any marks on them and are disease free. I think because I'm going to chop this, I'm going to just do a little bit more. A few more leaves. And then one thing I would always recommend is that you wash the leaves. And that will get rid of any dirt. And you can see there's a little bit on that one. I don't think you can see this on the camera, but there's lots of little black bits that have come off here. And you don't obviously want to eat those. So just dry those leaves slightly. Now, what some people do to bring out the flavour is they do something called smashing, which is when they go like that on the mint. But I prefer to chop mine. And I do have this wonderful herb chopper, which I was gifted many years ago and still use. And I find that when you chop it like this, you can smell instantly how it releases the oils from there. And I actually find this quite therapeutic. But do be careful, it is a very, very sharp blade. But the release of those oils is wonderful. And you just keep going. Actually, I'm just going to turn that round and do that this way. And there you have some finely chopped herbs. If you want them finer than that, you can do. You probably need a grinder to do that, or you can just keep going with a little bit of extra therapy by using the herb slicer, herb cutter. And that leaves you with some finely chopped herbs, which you can literally just sprinkle a little bit onto your breakfast in the morning. And that really elevates the taste. So that's my first demonstration of mint. Be aware, once you've chopped the mint, it does get everywhere, so having a cloth handy may be needed. Other food ideas that you could use this for is including adding mint to a protein shake. It totally changes the flavour of maybe what your regular protein shake tastes like. You can also add some leaves to a salad, literally just rip them or keep them whole. But if you want to change the flavour of your salad, then just slightly rip them. Or you can make a pesto as well. I've done that before. Or in the summer, if you add mint leaves to ice cube trays, freeze them, and then add them to drinks, it really adds another flavour. So that's my first example, so the what I call the food category. Secondly, you can create a lovely skincare oil, and here's how. So I'm just going to bring my demonstration tray over and take a few things out of here so that you can see them clearly. So secondly, you can create a lovely skincare oil, and here's how. So one of the things that you want to do is obviously cut sufficient leaves for your needs. And again, I would recommend that you give them a little rinse and just take off. You can see this one's slightly blemished, so I would take that off. And then what you need to do is get a sterilised jar. And literally pop this in to the jar. And then what I would suggest you do is take a carrot oil that you're comfortable using. I've got a couple here, castor oil and sweet almond. I think I'm going to go with castor oil here, which is quite a thick carrot oil. What you want to do is close the lid and then give it a good old shake so that the oil coats the leaves. And then you want to put that into the fridge for 3 to 4 days. So I have one here that I put in, I think it's about 4 days ago now, and you can make a note on the front. I've got a little label here which tells me that I've used black peppermint and the date that I did that on. Now, just to show you, black peppermint is another variety. It's got very small leaves, but it's a much more pepperminty smell than the garden mint or the spearmint that we're going to use later. And you can really get an immediate smell of the black peppermint here that has permeated into the oil. But it's obviously the oil that you want for your massage or whatever you're going to use it for. So one of the first things that you need to do is drain off the leaves. So we'll do that now. Put that to one side because we're going to use that in a moment. But what you can then do is, if you've got some old jars lying around, as long as they're sterilised, you can use those. So you could either pour the oil into here, and this is an old jam jar, and there's just enough in there to do a massage. Or what I like to do is to funnel this into an old travel bottle. And then you can use this as your body oil when you need to. So for example, if you've got dry hands, you can actually just pop that over. You don't need much. And that's gonna, as well as smelling wonderful, that's really going to add some moisture to your hands. The other thing that you can do with the leftover mint leaves is, if you've got a pestle and mortar around, is take the leftover leaves and then just grind them. Do be aware you can get a little bit messy with this, but it's worth it. And then what you're left with, obviously, this needs to be ground. This needs to be ground a little bit more. But you are left with a paste eventually if you keep going. And this is very good if you've got little cuts and grazes. You can put this onto the skin. You can either dab it on or actually leave it on for a little while if that's possible. And it almost has like a calming effect on the skin. So a lovely extra healing remedy for that. Okay, I'm just going to clear this away and then I'm going to wash my hands to move on to the next stage of the demonstration. So lastly, I want to share with you how I make a lovely cup of clean tasting, refreshing tea. So I'm using a different variety here, which is called spearmint, and I just love the flavour of spearmint, and the smell is wonderful as well. So there are so many mint varieties that you can choose to grow. You just grow what you like, and then you want to pick off some leaves. So these are slightly smaller. I'm just going to put this out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing. And then you literally just pick the leaves off that you want to use in your tea. Now, some people prefer to just put the leaves straight in, I do tend to wash mine first as well. And do just check the leaves while you're doing this. You don't want any that have got diseases on them or have got blemishes on. Now, some people prefer to just put the leaves as they are into the teapot. I literally just do a little bit of crushing with my herb cutter, and I think that extends the flavour a bit more. And you don't need much, you just want to crush the leaves slightly, and I think that helps to release the flavour. So I have got some hot water in my teapot. So I'm literally just going to add my tea leaves into there, and you put in as much as you want, and sometimes it's a little bit of you need a little bit of practice. You need to do it a few times to get the strength that you're happy with. And I would let that brew for about 5 minutes, but again, it's personal choice. So let it brew, or steep is the more formal word for it. Now, if you don't have a teapot, what you can do is use one of these diffusers. So you would literally put your mint leaves in here. Actually, we can just take some off to demonstrate this. And again, you can chop them if you want to, or you can just mash them up to release the oils. And then you close this up. And what's useful with these is it's better used probably in a mug rather than a teacup, because you can simply pop that into the mug and it stands up nicely. And you would leave that to steep for 5 minutes. So one thing you could do is put a timer on, or you could just approximate the time. So when you think you've got enough time to reach your flavour profile, so take your teapot, and pour out. And you want the sieve there because the mint leaves will have dissolved slightly, so you might get some grainy bits in the bottom which are not pleasant to drink. So just strain it with a tea strainer, and then you have some wonderful, clear, refreshing tea. With that wonderful spearmint flavour. That's really refreshing, actually. Lovely. So the last tip I want to share with you is just a note about storing mint that you want to keep fresh. So what you can do is just cut off some mint stalks like this from your garden. So particularly in the winter, if you don't want to keep going out into the garden, then you can put these stalks into a glass or even a mug with some water. And then if you put a cover over this, and it can be plastic or some other cover, what you're trying to do is just retain the humidity, make sure you've got some water in the bottom, and that will keep fresh in the fridge for a good few days, ensuring that your mint is available. Okay, I'm going to have another sip of this tea and I'm going to enjoy this. That is really refreshing. So that brings me to the end of my demonstrations on using mint from my herb garden. And I've really enjoyed the time thinking about all the things I could use mint for. There are obviously a lot more, but hopefully I've given you a few ideas. But also the whole purpose of this is, as you can see, I enjoy this. It really is giving yourself some me time to focus on something that you really enjoy doing. And I have really enjoyed sharing that experience with you. So thank you for watching.